You're listening to the Imprint Podcast. I'm your host, Micah, and today's episode is titled Freed at Last. This poem is written by my closest friend, Mikayla Baloch, and it's so funny because she was one of the very first people that I told that I was doing this podcast. And when I told her, she was so excited. And like a couple weeks had passed since I had told her. And then she gave me a poem that she wanted me to read that she had wrote. And so I was really excited, but I was also nervous because I was like, okay, now I actually have to go through with this because she gave me some writing and she's going to be waiting to hear it. So, I like to go to her and talk to her and just vent and bounce ideas off of her and things like that because I know she knows where I'm coming from. So again, very excited to be reading this and featuring her writing on this podcast today. So today is special because it's Wednesday, and Wednesday is a day that I talked about in my intro where it's essentially me blocking me out and reading somebody else's writing. So I'm calling it Writer's Block Wednesday. And every Wednesday I'm going to read someone else's writing, but I'm also going to give a prompt at the end of the episode every Wednesday for anybody who is listening in that wants to write or feels led to write and probably just doesn't know where to start. And it can be a poem, it could be just a blurb, it could be a story, it could be an essay, whatever you feel led to write. You can send it to me and I will feature it here on the show. So I'm very excited, especially excited to have one of my very closest friends be the first one to kind of spearhead this segment on the show. So I am going to go ahead and start. And again, this is titled Freed at Last. Not because of who I am, but because of what you've done. You've turned me into an angel. When I felt I had nowhere else to go, and I decided to run, and the death of my loved one was painful. When I wanted to cry, you took my hand, and when I looked at you, you said, it's time to take a stand. But as I started to stand up, the wind whispered in my ear and said, you can't. You told me I could do it, and I believed you. I thought to myself, is it really true? Or was this a joke like everything else? The thoughts spoke loud, and it felt like I wasn't myself. Roar was the sound of my inner lion, wanting to be freed from me. But there was something inside of me I just wouldn't let it be. I just couldn't figure out why the world hated me. I thought to myself over and over again, bam, it hit me. The inner angel was locked up inside of me. Finally, I told myself, it's time to be freed. Thank God, I'm free. Yes, free indeed. Wow, Mikayla. This is really good. So we're going to go ahead and just break it down stanza by stanza. I'm not really sure when this was written. I know she said she wrote this in 9th grade. Honestly, I think that the headspace she was in was obviously kind of like an inner battle. Clearly, there was a death of a loved one, and it was like, am I going to let grief overtake me, or am I going to stand up and tell my story? Anyway, that's just what I'm getting from it. So the first stanza says, not because of who I am, but because of what you've done. You've turned me into an angel. Now that I've read it through and I'm looking at it, I feel like this first part is like, I'm really a lion, which is what she references at the end. But because of what you've done, you've turned me into an angel. And not that there's anything wrong with an angel, but when I compare an angel to a lion, I think of angels to be a little bit more soft and pure and sweet. And when I think of a lion, I think of boldness, I think of courageousness, I think of strength. And so clearly, because something was done, it kind of reverted her back into being in that soft shell. The next stanza says, when I felt I had nowhere else to go, and I decided to run, and the death of my loved one was painful. So again, it's like grief is trying to creep its way in to kind of just silence and take away. And her resort is to run. The next stanza says, when I wanted to cry, you took my hand. And when I looked at you, you said, it's time to take a stand. And so I think of this in my own brain as God. You know, when we're hurting, when we're crying, when we're grieving, when we're going through, you know, the storms of life, we cry out to God and he does comfort us. He takes our hand. But the next line says, and when I looked at you, you said it's time to take a stand. So when I see that, I think of almost like a tough love. You know, God is like, I'm here for you. I'm going to comfort you. But it's time for you to take a stand. It's time for you to take your voice back. You know, be courageous. The next stanza says, but as I started to stand up, the wind whispered in my ear and said, you can't. Ain't that the devil? Ain't that just like the devil? So it's like God is telling you to do something. He's telling you to take a stand. And as soon as you get the strength to do it, here comes the devil whispering in your ear saying, you can't. And that is where kind of the inner battle starts. Okay, am I going to listen to this? Or am I going to do the opposite and say, nope, I'm going to stand firm on what God is telling me to do and I'm going to go. And that's not easy. That's why I keep referring to it as an inner battle, because I know what it's like to have such a soft voice, a little voice in your mind that is just deceitful. The next line, or the next stanza says, you told me I could do it and I believed you. I thought to myself, is it really true? Or was this a joke like everything else? That hit me, because it's really a picture of what I was going through before I started this podcast. It was like, I know God was telling me to do this and I believed him. And then I realized I've never done a podcast before. I don't have a mic. I don't have the best laptop in the world. I don't have the software. And then I started to believe, like, okay, maybe this is just me, or maybe this is just, you know, a random idea. And I started to doubt myself. And God was like, no. And then piece by piece, he started to show me, like, you know, your boyfriend has a mic. You can borrow his microphone. You know, you have a laptop that's working. You have the ability to download the software that you need. So it was like little stuff like that was showing me, like, okay, maybe I do have this. Maybe, you know, this is what God wants for me. So I can totally relate to that line. The next stanza says, the thoughts spoke loud and it felt like I wasn't myself. Roar was the sound of my inner lion wanting to be freed from me. This is just getting deeper and deeper into what I was feeling. So my interpretation of this is the voices are so loud that you start to realize they're not even real. And you start to feel like a stirring up on the inside of you, knowing that there's something in there that needs to be freed. But as long as you keep listening to those voices, it will never be freed. It will never get out. And that's just how I felt. I felt like the more I listened to these doubtful voices in my head, the more stirring this gift is going to be in the inside of me. And the more urge I'm going to have to, like, release it. But it won't be released if I keep doubting myself, if I keep making excuses, if I keep, you know, self-sabotaging. The next stanza says, but there was something inside of me, I just wouldn't let it be. I couldn't figure out why the world hated me. Or I just couldn't figure out why the world hated me. This is, again, just that inner battle going back and forth. You know, I'm believing that something is there, but I'm not sure. I'm doubting. And I just couldn't figure out why the world hated me. You know, I feel like that's just another lie that's in this poem that is coming up. It's very easy, like I said, to focus in and hone in on the things that are not true. You know, obviously the world doesn't hate her in this poem, but it's something that she believed, it's something that she thought when she was writing this. And for me, it wasn't that the world hated me, but it was more of like, I can't do this, you know, I don't know how to do this. And I felt like the more I was dwelling on that, the further I was pushing myself back. And God was like, I need you to do this and I need you to do it now. So you need to shake all of that off and focus on what I'm saying, not what the devil is saying, and not even what you're saying. Focus on me. The next one says, I thought to myself over and over again, bam, it hit me. My inner angel, or the inner angel, was locked up inside of me. So this is kind of going to the stanza before where it talks about the lion wanting to be freed. And the lion and the angel in the poem to me are the same person. It's just knowing what side God wants you to show. And obviously the angel is locked up just like the lion was locked up. And God is like, I want it to be free. Like, I want you to feel free. It's not time to be shy and timid. It's time to be loud and courageous. And then the last stanza says, finally, I told myself it's time to be freed. Thank God I'm free. Yes, free indeed. A lot to unpack here. And like I said, I don't know the context or the background of the poem, but I know how I can apply it to me. And I know how another listener can apply it to themselves, because it's really, the message here is just being free and listening to God, listening to the positive things. You know, if you heard one time, like, you can do it and you're capable, stick with that. Don't listen to the million other little negative things that are trying to tear you down, because it's not going to do anything but keep you locked up, keep you caged up. I really liked the angel and the lion kind of wrestling back and forth. I liked how it kind of shed light onto what was happening mentally and even spiritually, you know, where it says there was something locked up inside of me. There was something, you know, inside of me. And finally, she released that roar. And I can see how people can twist things and make it seem like this is God, or this is me, or this is the devil. But one thing about it is, when God speaks, you won't just hear it, you'll feel it. I know for a fact, whenever the devil speaks, I don't feel it, but I hear it. And sometimes it can just be really, really loud. But I know when God is speaking, I feel it. That is how I distinguish, okay, this is the negative, this is the positive, this is of God, this is not. And once I can stick to what God is saying, it's easy for me to go ahead and go for it. It's easy for me to feel free. That's kind of what I got out of this. And this is what I learned from this. I also like the reference of the lion for another reason. And I am not a big zodiac person. I don't get into astrology and things of that nature. But I know that me and her are both July babies. We're both Leos. And so I look at it from that perspective as well. And I look at the lion as a symbol, like I said, of courageousness and power. And I use that as a reminder, like, God instilled that same fire in me. And so when I read this poem, I immediately thought of myself, and I immediately thought of her, because a lot of the situations that we go through are very similar. And we both have been talking about how we're in a stage in our lives where we need to be more courageous and not be so, you know, in our heads about things, but be like, just do it. We're at a point where we both know where we're struggling at. We both know what we need to do. And it's just a matter of us doing it, you know, just going out there, being bold and taking that step, and not always knowing what's going to be next. So it was very opportune to read this at this stage in our lives, because I feel like we both need to hear this at this time. I definitely needed to hear it. So I know for a fact there's plenty of people that also need to hear it. You know, be bold, take that step, trust God, walk by faith. Even if you are scared, even if you're nervous, like, just, you know, do it afraid. So that is everything that I feel I had to get off my chest about this poem. Again, I'm so happy that she allowed me to read this, and it's given me a little bit more of an excitement to do this, because I love to read and interpret other people's writing. That's just another component of writing that I enjoy, and I don't think it gets talked about often. It's like really critiquing writing. To kind of inspire you to write, I have a prompt, and I'm going to try to do a prompt on every Writer's Block Wednesday to encourage other people to write and give them something to create. So the prompt that I have, I got from Pinterest, of course, and it says, write about a time when you successfully overcame a challenge. And I'm going to let you interpret how you want to write about that. If you want to do a poem, if you want to do a blurb, if you want to do a journal entry, and it could be any type of challenge, big or small. So again, if you feel led to share it, go ahead and email it to that email, and hopefully you can be featured on the next Writer's Block Wednesday. For now, I hope you enjoyed this written piece of the journey, and I hope I can inspire you to write your own, and I'll talk to you in the next episode.